In the misty twilight of a 1930s English autumn, Harrington Manor loomed like a sentinel over the fog-shrouded moors. Sir Reginald Harrington, the iron-fisted industrialist whose fortunes were forged in the fires of empire, hosted a tense gathering of family and associates. As the grandfather clock struck 9, a piercing scream shattered the opulent drawing-room. Guests rushed to the locked study, where Sir Reginald lay slumped over his desk, his face contorted in agony, a half-empty glass of port beside him. No weapon, no intruder, only the whisper of poison in the air. Who among them had twisted fate into death? The little Belgian detective, Hercule Poirot, observed from the shadows. Chapter 1. Arrival at the Manor. The train exhaled a long, weary sigh as it pulled into Ashford-on-Moors, its iron flanks glistening with the damp of an English autumn. Hercule Poirot, diminutive and impeccably attired in a charcoal-grey overcoat that reached precisely to the midpoint of his polished spats, stepped down onto the platform, with the measured dignity of a man who regarded punctuality as a moral virtue. His patent leather shoes clicked once, twice, upon the wet flagstones, and he paused to survey the scene with eyes the colour of pale green absinthe, eyes that missed nothing. A thin mist curled about the station lamps like the breath of some spectral hound. Beyond the low roof of the booking hall, the moors stretched away in undulating waves of heather and bracken, their purples and browns muted to ash by the failing light. Somewhere in the distance a curlew called, its cry lonely and mournful, as though it mourned the century itself. Poirot adjusted the knot of his silk tie, smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his waistcoat, and permitted himself the faintest twitch of the moustache. An indulgence he allowed only when absolutely certain no one observed. "Monsieur Poirot." The voice belonged to a chauffeur of military bearing, his peaked cap set at a regulation angle, his gloved hands resting lightly upon the wheel of a gleaming Daimler limousine. The brass fittings of the car caught the last reluctant rays of the sun and flung them back like accusations. "Wilkins, sir, at your service. Sir Reginald's compliments, and the motor is ready." Poirot inclined his head with the courtesy of a diplomat receiving an ambassador. "Enchanté, Monsieur Wilkins. One is always gratified by efficiency." He allowed the chauffeur to relieve him of his valise, a modest affair of Moroccan leather containing, among other necessities, 3 pairs of silk pyjamas, a box of tisane, and a small morocco case in which reposed the photographs of certain grey cells that had solved more crimes than Scotland Yard cared to admit. The Daimler purred into life and nosed its way along a lane so narrow that the hedgerows scraped the paintwork with insolent familiarity. Poirot sat very straight, hands folded upon the head of his cane, observing the landscape with the concentration of a general studying a map before battle. The trees were skeletal, their branches clawing at a sky the colour of tarnished pewter. Here and there a cottage crouched beneath a thatch so thick it resembled the pelt of some slumbering beast. Smoke rose in languid spirals from chimneys, carrying with it the faint comforting scent of applewood and coal. "Tell me, Wilkins," Poirot said at length, his voice soft yet carrying the authority of one accustomed to being answered, "how long have you served Sir Reginald Harrington?" "Coming on 15 years, sir." The chauffeur's reflection in the driving mirror was impassive. "Started as second footman when Lady Evelyn, Miss Fairchild as she was then, came to the house as bride." "Ah, and the family? They are content?" Wilkins's gloved fingers tightened fractionally upon the wheel. "Content is a strong word in these parts, sir. Sir Reginald built his fortune in African mines. Diamonds, gold, a touch of ruthlessness. The family? Well, they orbit him like planets round a rather volatile sun. Poirot's moustache twitched again. Planets, you say? And do any of these planets threaten to collide? The chauffeur's eyes flicked to the mirror and away. There's talk, sir. Young Mr. Jonathan's debts. Mr. Black's quarrels over shares. Miss Thorne, she's the secretary, keeps her own counsel, and her ladyship. He let the sentence drift into the gathering dusk. Her ladyship wears her smile like armour, sir, but armour can crack. The Daimler crested a rise, and Harrington Manor revealed itself with the suddenness of a conjurer's trick. It was a house that had begun life as a modest Tudor hall, and had grown, like some architectural topsy, through the centuries. Wings had been added, facades refaced, towers tacked on with the cheerful abandon of a child piling bricks. The result was a glorious jumble of styles, mullioned windows jostling with Georgian sashes, Gothic arches shouldering Palladian pediments, yet somehow the whole cohered into a single brooding presence. Ivy clung to the stonework like the grasp of an old debt, and every chimney belched smoke with the urgency of a steamship making port. Wilkins brought the car to a halt upon the gravel sweep before the entrance portico. Liveried footmen materialized as if conjured from the very air, and Poirot descended with the gravity of a monarch, alighting from a state coach. The front doors, massive slabs of oak studded with iron, swung inward, and a butler of sepulchral dignity bowed low. "Mr. Poirot, Sir Reginald awaits you in the long gallery, if you would follow me." The entrance hall was a cavern of shadows and gilt. A vast fireplace yawned like the mouth of some medieval dragon, its andirons wrought in the shape of snarling wolves. Above the mantel, a portrait of Sir Reginald in his prime glowered down, square-jawed, eyes like chips of flint, one hand resting upon a globe as though the world itself were his personal possession. Poirot paused beneath it, head tilted. "A formidable gentleman," he murmured. "Indeed, sir," the butler intoned. "This way." They proceeded along a corridor panelled in dark oak, past suits of armour that stood sentinel with visors lowered, past tapestries depicting hunts in which the quarry appeared to have the worst of it. The air was heavy with beeswax and old secrets. At length they reached the long gallery, a cavernous apartment lit by 100 candles in silver sconces. The flames trembled in the draught, throwing shadows that capered like malevolent imps across the coffered ceiling. Sir Reginald Harrington stood at the far end, silhouetted against a window that looked out upon the darkening moors. He was a big man, broad of shoulder and thick of neck, dressed in a dinner jacket that strained at the seams. His hair was iron grey, cropped close to the skull, and his moustache, though magnificent, was no match for Poirot's. When he turned, his smile was a flash of white in a face burnt brown by African suns. "Monsieur Poirot, by God, it's good to see you." His voice was a bass rumble that seemed to vibrate the very crystal in the chandeliers. "Hastings wrote that you were the cleverest devil in Europe. I need clever, sir. These are treacherous times." Poirot bowed with exquisite precision. "One is flattered, Sir Reginald, though I confess Captain Hastings is prone to exaggeration. He believes, for instance, that I can solve the Times crossword in ink." Sir Reginald's laugh was a bark. "Come, meet the rest of this menagerie." He gestured, and the shadows resolved into figures. First, Lady Evelyn Harrington. She was perhaps 40, though grief and strain had etched finer lines about her eyes than years alone could account for. Her gown was of midnight blue silk, cut with the severity of a woman who had long ago abandoned frivolity. A single strand of pearls glowed at her throat like captive moons. She extended a gloved hand. "Monsieur Poirot, my husband speaks highly of your talents." "Madam." Poirot's bow was deeper this time, his lips brushing the air an inch above her knuckles. "One perceives that you are a lady of discernment, and of sorrows, perhaps." Her eyes flickered, surprise or recognition, but she merely smiled a smile that did not reach her eyes. "The moors are lonely, monsieur. One grows accustomed." Next, Jonathan Harrington, Sir Reginald's son and heir. He was 26, tall and slender to the point of dissipation, with his father's jaw but none of his force. His evening clothes were exquisitely cut, yet somehow gave the impression of being borrowed. His handshake was limp, his eyes restless. "Delighted," he murmured, though delight seemed the last emotion on his mind. A faint aroma of whiskey clung to him, like a guilty secret. Elias Black was introduced as Sir Reginald's business partner. He was a lean, saturnine man, in his 50s, with a nose like a hatchet, and eyes that glittered with the cold brilliance of a miser counting coins. His dinner jacket was black, his shirt front a stiff expanse of white, and his voice carried the nasal cadence of the Midlands. "Poirot," he said, as though testing the name for flaws. "Heard you sorted out that business on the Orient Express. Clever." "One does what one can," Poirot replied modestly, though his moustache betrayed a quiver of satisfaction. Last came Clara Thorne, Sir Reginald's secretary. She was 30-ish, neat as a pin in a charcoal grey dress that buttoned to the throat. Her hair was drawn back severely, her spectacles perched upon a nose that would have been pretty had it not been for the perpetual frown of concentration. She offered a small, precise nod. "Monsieur, I have prepared the guest list and the seating plan for dinner. If there is anything further you require, Mademoiselle Thorne, your efficiency is a balm to the soul. One is reminded of a well-ordered filing cabinet, admirable, yet containing who knows what secrets in its drawers." A flush crept up her neck, but she merely adjusted her spectacles and murmured something about checking the wine. Sir Reginald clapped his hands with the force of a pistol shot. "Enough chatter! Wilkins, show Monsieur Poirot to his room. Dinner in an hour. We dress, of course." The butler led Poirot up a staircase that spiralled like the interior of a nautilus shell. Portraits lined the walls, Harringtons through the ages, each more forbidding than the last. One, a cavalier with a lace collar and a sneer, seemed to follow Poirot with his eyes. At the landing, a suit of armour held a halberd at an angle that suggested it had seen active service more recently than the 17th century. Poirot's chamber was in the east wing, overlooking the rose garden, though the roses, in November, were little more than thorny skeletons. The room itself was a masterpiece of baronial splendour. A four-poster bed large enough to accommodate a small regiment, a fireplace in which one could have roasted an ox, and a wardrobe that could have housed the entire chorus of a West End musical. A fire crackled merrily, and upon the mantel stood a porcelain clock ticking with the smug precision of one who knows the exact time of one's demise. Poirot removed his hat and coat, laying them across a chair with the care of a mother, arranging her child for a photograph. He opened his valise, extracted a small leather case, and from it withdrew a photograph of a woman with dark eyes and a smile like springtime. For a moment, his face softened. Then the mask of urbane detachment slipped back into place. "One does not travel to the country for pleasure," he told the empty room. One travels because somewhere, in this house of ancient grudges and modern appetites, a crime is ripening like a poisoned fruit. And Hercule Poirot, he will be there to pluck it before it falls. He crossed to the window. Below, the gravel sweep was empty save for the Daimler, its headlights now extinguished. Beyond, the moors rolled away into darkness. And somewhere out there, a light winked, once, twice, then was gone. A signal, a trick of the eye. Poirot filed it away in the meticulous card index of his mind. A gong sounded somewhere deep in the bowels of the house, its note reverberating through corridors and stairwells like the voice of doom itself. Poirot consulted his pocket watch. 7 o'clock precisely. He permitted himself a small smile of approval. The English, for all their eccentricities, understood the importance of punctuality at mealtimes. He adjusted his tie, smoothed his moustache with a finger dipped in pomade, and descended to meet his fate. And though he did not yet know it, the first act of a tragedy that would stain the ancient stones of Harrington Manor with blood as surely as any medieval feud. Chapter 2. Whispers over dinner. The gong's bronze reverberation still trembled in the rafters when Hercule Poirot descended the grand staircase, each step measured, his cane tapping a soft counterpoint to the distant clatter of silver. The long gallery had been transformed, the candelabra now blazed with fresh tapers, and footmen in powder-blue livery stood like sentinels at every door. A faint aroma of beeswax mingled with the richer promise of roasting pheasant and claret. Sir Reginald awaited at the foot of the stairs, resplendent in white tie and tails, a ruby the size of a pigeon's egg glowing at his breast. "Poirot, you look as though you've stepped from the pages of La Mode Illustrée. Come, the others are assembled." He offered a hand like a bear's paw, and Poirot accepted it with the wariness of a man clasping a loaded revolver. They processed through an archway into the dining room, a vaulted chamber whose hammer-beam roof vanished into shadow. The table, a single slab of oak that could have seated the Last Supper twice over, was laid with damask so wide it seemed to radiate its own light. Crystal goblets caught the candle flames and fractured them into 1,000 shards of rainbow. At the far end, a vast Venetian mirror reflected the scene with merciless clarity. The Harringtons, their satellites, and the little Belgian who observed them all. Lady Evelyn occupied the hostess's chair, her gown now changed to emerald silk that shimmered like beetle wings. She inclined her head as Poirot took the seat to her right. "Monsieur, I trust your room is comfortable." "Madam, it is perfection. One feels almost guilty to disturb the dust of centuries with mere modern habitation." His smile was courteous, but his eyes catalogued. The faint tremor in her left hand as she lifted her water-glass, the way her gaze slid sideways whenever her husband's voice rose. To Poirot's left sat Clara Thorne, spectacles glinting, a small leather-bound notebook open beside her plate. She had exchanged her severe day dress for one of charcoal velvet, severe still, but the severity now edged with something almost defiant. Jonathan Harrington lounged opposite, his bow tie already askew, a flush high on his cheekbones that owed nothing to the fire. Elias Black at the table's foot toyed with a silver salt cellar shaped like a miniature cannon, his long fingers restless. Sir Reginald took his place at the head and rapped the table with a spoon. "Let's have no ceremony. We're not at Buckingham Palace." The footman sprang forward. Soup plates appeared as if by sleight of hand, consommé amber as topaz, fragrant with sherry and thyme. Conversation began in the desultory fashion of English dinners. The weather, unseasonably damp, The shooting, indifferent. The new wireless set in the morning room, a marvel, though it insisted on playing dance bands at breakfast. Poirot listened, his spoon moving with the precision of a metronome, noting the undercurrents beneath the banalities. Jonathan drained his glass and signalled for more. "Father, must we discuss the estate again? I'm sure Monsieur Poirot didn't travel 50 miles to hear about drainage ditches." Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "Drainage ditches pay for your tailor's bills, my boy, and your bookmaker's, unless I miss my guess." A brittle silence fell, broken only by the soft clink of Clara's pen as she made a note. Lady Evelyn's fan snapped open. She plied it with the vigour of a semaphore signaller. "Reginald, perhaps we might speak of pleasanter things. Monsieur Poirot, do you admire the Moors?" "One admires their melancholy, madame. They are like the English character, beautiful, secretive, and occasionally treacherous underfoot." Black gave a bark of laughter. "Treacherous is right. Last winter a fellow from Leeds wandered off the path and was swallowed by a bog. Found his hat 3 weeks later, floating like a lily pad." Jonathan shuddered theatrically. "Charming dinner talk, Elias. Pass the decanter." The pheasant arrived, bronzed and glistening, attended by a flotilla of silver dishes. Bread sauce, game chips, cranberries sharp as winter stars. Sir Reginald carved with the gusto of a man who had once hacked his way through African jungles. "Poirot, you must try the 21 port later. Laid down the year Jonathan was born, though I sometimes think the wine has aged better than the boy." Jonathan's laugh was thin. "At least the port doesn't lecture me about responsibility." Clara leaned forward, voice low but clear. "Sir, the accounts for the Nyasaland syndicate are ready for your signature. If we could discuss them after dinner, Clara. A man's entitled to 1 hour without ledgers." Sir Reginald's tone brooked no argument, yet Poirot noted the secretary's fingers tightening on her fork until the knuckles blanched. Lady Evelyn's fan had stilled. "Reginald, you promised Dr. Lang would join us. He telephoned to say the fog delayed him. Lang can find his way here blindfolded, probably lingering over some medical journal." Sir Reginald speared a slice of pheasant with unnecessary violence. "Man's too clever by half, like our Belgian friend here." Poirot inclined his head. "One does not object to cleverness, provided it is employed in the service of order." Black raised an eyebrow. "Order? In this house? You're optimistic, Poirot. Half the county knows Reginald and I are at daggers drawn over the Rhodesian concession. He wants to sell. I want to expand. Stalemate." Sir Reginald's eyes glinted. "And half the county knows you've been cooking the books, Elias. Careful what you confess at table." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jonathan stared at his plate. Clara's pen scratched furiously. Lady Evelyn's fan resumed its frantic signalling. Into the silence came the soft pop of a champagne cork. Second course, perhaps to drown the taste of enmity. Dessert was a charlotte russe, quivering in a silver bowl, surrounded by hothouse strawberries that glowed like rubies. As the footman circulated with the port decanter, its contents dark as arterial blood, Sir Reginald raised his glass. "To prosperity, or its end?" The toast hung in the air, ambiguous, almost a threat. Poirot sipped and found the wine magnificent. Black cherries, smoke, a hint of violets. He set the glass down with care. "A noble vintage, Sir Reginald. One wonders what secrets it might reveal if it could speak." Jonathan laughed too loudly. "It would probably lecture me about moderation." Clara closed her notebook with a snap. "If you'll excuse me, I must check the Evening Post." She rose, spectacles flashing in the candlelight, and glided from the room with the rigidity of a clockwork figure. Lady Evelyn watched her go, then turned to Poirot. "Clara is indispensable. She has been with us 5 years, ever since my husband's indisposition in Johannesburg." "Indisposition?" Poirot's tone was silk over steel. "A touch of fever," Sir Reginald growled. "Nothing more." But Poirot's little grey cells were already turning. Fever, or something administered in a Johannesburg hospital. He filed the thought away as the ladies withdrew. Lady Evelyn's departure, a rustle of silk. Clara's absence, a small, precise vacuum. The men settled into leather armchairs before the fire, port and cigars making their slow circuit. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the quarter hour, its note muffled as though reluctant to disturb the gathering storm. Poirot excused himself early, pleading the traveller's need for rest. As he climbed the stairs, he paused on the landing. From the dining room below drifted the murmur of voices, Sir Reginald's rumble, Black's nasal retort, Jonathan's petulant interruption, and beneath it all, the faint scratch of Clara's pen, still at work, though the meal was done. In his chamber, Poirot stood at the window. The fog had swallowed the moors entire. Only the nearest yew trees loomed like black sentinels. He touched the photograph on the mantel, his countess long gone, and permitted himself a sigh. "One does not dine with vipers for pleasure," he told the empty room. "One dines to observe the flick of the tongue, the gleam of the fang. And somewhere in this house, mes amis, the poison is already being measured." A soft footfall in the corridor made him turn. Through the keyhole, he glimpsed a shadow, Clara, perhaps, or another, pausing outside Sir Reginald's study door. The shadow hesitated, then vanished. Poirot's moustache bristled with satisfaction. The game, as the English said, was afoot. Chapter 3. The Scream in the Night. The house settled into the hush that follows a strained dinner. Floorboards creaking like old bones, the wind prowling the eaves, and somewhere a clock striking 11 with the solemnity of a judge pronouncing sentence. Hercule Poirot, in silk pyjamas the colour of midnight and a dressing gown of quilted burgundy, sat at the escritoire in his chamber. A single green-shaded lamp cast a pool of light over the leather-bound notebook in which he recorded in a neat continental hand the evening's observations. He underlined the last phrase twice, then closed the book with a soft snap. Rising, he crossed to the window. The fog had thickened to the consistency of curdled milk. Not a star pricked the blackness. Yet somewhere beyond the yew hedge, a light moved once, twice, then was extinguished. Poirot's moustache bristled. A lantern? A signal? Or merely the gamekeeper on his rounds? He filed the anomaly away and turned to his bedtime ritual. A cup of tisane, the careful waxing of the moustache, the arrangement of tomorrow's attire upon the valet stand. At 11:30, he extinguished the lamp and slipped between sheets that smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. Sleep, however, was a coy mistress. The house breathed around him, pipes ticking, a shutter tapping, the distant bark of a fox. And beneath it all, the sense of a tension coiled like a spring. He was drifting into that borderland where the little grey cells still turn, though the body rests when the scream came. It was not the polite shriek of a lady startled by a mouse. It was the raw, animal sound of a soul confronted by the abyss. It tore through the corridors, ricocheted off oak panelling, and shattered the night into 1,000 jagged pieces. Poirot was out of bed before the echo died, feet into slippers, dressing gown flung about his shoulders. He seized his cane, more for balance than defence, and flung open the door. The upper landing was a chaos of half-dressed figures converging like moths about a flame. Jonathan Harrington, hair tousled, eyes wild, clutched a brass candlestick as though it were Excalibur. Elias Black, in a crimson smoking jacket, barked questions no one answered. Clara Thorne appeared from the servants' stair, spectacles askew, a ledger still clutched to her bosom. Lady Evelyn, pale as parchment in a lace-trimmed wrapper, pressed both hands to her mouth. "Reginald!" she gasped. "It came from the study!" They descended in a ragged phalanx, Poirot in the van despite his stature. The study door, massive oak bound with iron, stood ajar, a thin blade of light spilling onto the turkey runner. From within came a sound like the gurgling of a blocked drain. Poirot shouldered past Jonathan and entered. Sir Reginald Harrington lay sprawled across his desk as though felled by an invisible axe. His head was thrown back, eyes bulging in a face the colour of putty. Foam, white and viscous, oozed from the corner of his mouth and dripped onto a blotter already soaked with port. The crystal tumbler that had held the wine lay shattered on the hearthrug, its contents staining the Persian silk, the deep crimson of arterial blood. The air was thick with the almond-sweet stench of cyanide. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot breathed. He knelt, gloved fingers, he had paused to don kid gloves from his pocket, hovering over the carotid. No pulse. The body was still warm. Rigour had not yet begun its grim choreography. "He has been dead perhaps 20 minutes, no more." Lady Evelyn swayed in the doorway. I heard him groan. I was passing in the corridor. The door was locked. I rattled the handle." Her voice cracked like thin ice. Jonathan dropped the candlestick with a clang. "Locked? But that's impossible. Father never locked the study when he worked late." "Yet locked it is," Poirot said. He tried the handle. The bolt was shot from within. The key gleamed in the lock on the inside of the door. And the windows. He crossed to the pair of tall casements that overlooked the rose garden. Both were fastened with brass latches, the curtains undisturbed. No sign of forced entry. No footprints on the dew-drenched sill. Black pushed forward, nostrils flaring. "Poison! Smell it! Bitter almonds, cyanide. But how? The port decanter was on the sideboard at dinner. We all drank from it." "Except Sir Reginald took his own bottle to the study," Clara said, voice trembling. "The 21, sealed with red wax. He was particular about it." Poirot's gaze swept the room. The decanter stood on a silver tray beside a leather-bound ledger. The wax seal was broken, the cork replaced but not fully seated. A single glass, Sir Reginald's own, engraved with the family crest, lay beside the body. Poirot lifted it carefully, sniffing. The almond odour was unmistakable, overlaid with the rich fruit of the vintage. "Sealed in the cellar this afternoon," Clara continued. "I saw Wilkins bring it up myself. No one touched it after dinner." "Yet someone did," Poirot murmured. He examined the cork. A tiny puncture, almost invisible, as though made by a fine needle. "Ah, here is the method perhaps. A syringe through the cork. Poison introduced without breaking the seal. Ingenious." Jonathan's face had gone the colour of tallow. "But who? We were all upstairs," Black finished, "or in the drawing room. I was smoking on the terrace, alone." Lady Evelyn's wrapper slipped from one shoulder. "I retired directly after the ladies left the table. I heard nothing until the groan." Clara hugged the ledger tighter. "I was in the library, finishing correspondence. The study is adjacent. I would have heard if anyone entered." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yet someone did enter. Or the poison was administered earlier, and Sir Reginald locked himself in to die. He turned to the desk. Papers were scattered. A half-written letter to a solicitor in Nairobi, a balance sheet showing the Nyasaland syndicate heavily in debt, a photograph of a younger Sir Reginald standing beside a diamond mine, arm about a smiling African foreman whose face had been scratched out with savage strokes. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Wilkins and 2 footmen, summoned by the scream, "Sir! Madame!" What? Wilkins took in the scene and blanched. "Shall I telephone for Dr. Lang?" "And the police," Poirot said crisply. "Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard is known to me. Ask for him by name. Tell him Hercule Poirot requests his presence, and no one is to leave the house." As Wilkins hurried off, Poirot knelt again beside the body. With delicate precision, he lifted Sir Reginald's right hand. Beneath the manicured nails was a faint trace of red wax, the same wax that had sealed the fatal bottle. "He opened it himself," Poirot said softly, "but the poison was already within." Jonathan sank into a leather armchair, head in hands. "Father! Dead! It's not possible!" Black paced like a caged leopard. "Someone in this house is a murderer, one of us." Lady Evelyn's knees buckled. Clara caught her, guiding her to a sofa. "Courage, madam. The truth will out." Poirot straightened, his small frame suddenly the axis about which the room revolved. "The truth, yes. But first, we secure the scene. Wilkins." The butler reappeared, telephone receiver still in hand. "Station a man at every external door. Admit the doctor and the police, and bring me the household keys." As the butler departed, Poirot's gaze swept the suspects. 4 faces, 4 masks, grief, shock, calculation, fear. And behind one of them, the cold satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. Outside, the fog pressed closer, swallowing sound, swallowing light. Inside, the study clock ticked on, indifferent to the fact that its master would never wind it again. Poirot touched the broken glass with the tip of his cane. A locked room, a sealed bottle, a poison that leaves no trace but death. The perfect crime, mes amis, almost. Somewhere, in the house, a floorboard creaked. Soft, deliberate, the footstep of someone who believed themselves unobserved. Poirot's head snapped round, but the corridor was empty. The game had moved to its next square, and the little Belgian intended to be 3 moves ahead. Chapter 4. Interrogations begin. Dawn crept over Harrington Manor like a guilty conscience, pale and reluctant. The fog had lifted just enough to reveal the sodden moors, the heather the colour of dried blood. In the study, the corpse of Sir Reginald still sprawled across his desk, one rigid arm outstretched, as though reaching for a ledger that would never balance again. A constable stood guard at the door, helmet tucked beneath his arm, face the green of unripe cheese. Hercule Poirot had not slept. He had spent the small hours in the library, surrounded by atlases of African mines and photograph albums whose pages crackled with age. Now, at 7 o'clock, he stood before the tall windows of the morning room, hands clasped behind his back, watching the local police arrive in a convoy of Morris cars that looked absurdly cheerful against the grim facade. Inspector Japp was the last to alight, bowler hat clamped firmly despite the wind, pipe clenched between teeth that had worried tougher cases than this. He spotted Poirot and raised a hand in sardonic salute. "Morning, Poirot. Thought I'd retired you to your beehives and your little grey cells. Instead, I find you knee-deep in cyanide and aristocracy. Mon cher Japp, retirement is for those who have solved all the puzzles life offers. I, alas, remain insatiable." Poirot's smile was thin. "Come, the body is cold, the suspect's warmer. We begin." They established headquarters in the billiard room. Green baize table cleared, cues racked like soldiers at attention. A stenographer from the county constabulary sat ready with notebook and sharpened pencil. Japp took the head position, Poirot to his right, a small table between them holding the fatal decanter, the broken glass sealed in a paper bag, and the cork with its telltale puncture. Household first, Japp decided, then the family, Wilkins. The butler entered with the stiffness of a man who has never before been summoned to a room smelling of chalk and suspicion. He gave his statement in clipped sentences. Decanter fetched from cellar at 6:30. Seal intact, placed on study tray at 7:15. No one entered the study after Sir Reginald retired at 10:45. Heard the scream at 11:22 precisely. Checked the hall clock. Anyone near the study corridor between 10:45 and the scream? Japp asked. Wilkins hesitated. Young Mr. Jonathan passed the foot of the servant's stair at 11 sharp. Said he was fetching a book from the library. Miss Thorne was in the muniments room until 11:10. Her ladyship walked the long gallery at 11:15, said she couldn't sleep. Poirot's eyebrow arched. And? Yourself, Wilkins? Polishing silver in the pantry, sir. Footman Graves can confirm. Japp dismissed him with a nod. Graves next. The footman corroborated. Wilkins never left the pantry. But he added, voice dropping, Begging your pardon, sir, but I saw Mr. Black on the terrace at 11, smoking a cigar. Looked like he was watching the study windows. Japp's pipe emitted a thoughtful puff. Black claims he was on the terrace alone. Let's see if solitude agrees with him. Elias Black entered with the swagger of a man who believes money insulates him from inconvenience. He took the chair opposite Japp, crossed his legs, and regarded the policeman with the weary amusement of a lion tolerating jackals. Procedure, gentlemen. Ask away. Japp slid a photograph across the baize, the scratched-out face of the African foreman. Recognize this? Black's composure flickered. Old photo. Johannesburg, 22. The foreman, Kipsang, was light-fingered. Reginald sacked him. End of story. End? Someone took a penknife to his face. You, perhaps. Black's laugh was brittle. I quarrelled with Reginald over shares, not photographs. He wanted to sell the Rhodesian concession to Americans. I refused. Stalemate. But murder? He spread manicured hands. I was on the terrace. Ask the stars. Poirot leaned forward. The stars, monsieur, are notoriously poor witnesses. But the cigar ash on the balustrade, Dunhill, if I am not mistaken, matches the butt in your pocket. You watched the study. Why? Black's eyes narrowed. Reginald was drafting a new will. Threatened to cut Jonathan out entirely, leave everything to a trust I couldn't touch. I wanted to see if he'd burn the old one. He didn't. Japp made a note. And after the scream? Ran inside with the others. Found the door locked. End of alibi. Poirot's voice was silk. Convenient, the locked door, like a stage magician's cabinet. Black rose. I've shares to protect and a reputation. Poison isn't my style. He left, the door closing with soft finality. Lady Evelyn was next. She had changed into mourning black that became her better than any jewel. Her hands were steady now, but her eyes held the exhaustion of a woman who has cried in private. Japp offered a chair. Madam, your movements after dinner? I retired at 10:30. Read in my sitting room, Middlemarch, if it matters. At 11:15 I walked the long gallery for air. Heard my husband groan at 11:21. Rattled the study door. Locked. Screamed. Poirot studied her. You said groan, not cry, precise. You knew the sound of his voice in extremis? She met his gaze. 20 years of marriage, monsieur. I knew every cadence, anger, pain, drunkenness. That was pain. Japp produced the balance sheet. Your husband's syndicate is insolvent. The new will? Were you aware he planned to leave you only a life interest? Shh! Colour drained from her cheeks. He mentioned it in anger last week. Said I spent too much on charities. I told him charities were cheaper than divorce. A ghost of a smile. He laughed. I thought it bluff. Poirot's voice softened. And Dr. Lang? He was expected last night. Victor, Dr. Lang, was delayed by fog. He telephoned at 9. Reginald had episodes, heart flutters. Victor prescribed digitalis. Her fingers twisted the jet beads at her throat. Japp dismissed her gently. Clara Thorne entered clutching a stenographer's pad like a shield. Her spectacles were fogged. She polished them nervously. Miss Thorne, you were in the muniments room? Cataloguing deeds. Sir Reginald wanted the Nyasaland titles ready for morning. I left at 11:10 past the study door. It was ajar. I saw him open the decanter, pour a glass. He looked unwell. I asked if he needed anything. He waved me away. Poirot pounced. Unwell how? Flushed, sweating, said the port would settle him. I returned to the library, heard nothing until Lady Evelyn screamed. Japp slid the cork across. This puncture, could a secretary's pen have made it? Clara blanched. I use a fountain pen, steel nib, but I never... Poirot interrupted. Your devotion to Sir Reginald was remarked upon. Some might call it excessive. Her chin lifted. I was his secretary, not his mistress. He trusted me with his secrets, that is all. Japp produced a letter found in the study wastebasket. Clara's handwriting, unsealed. If you proceed with the new will, you destroy us both. Clara's composure cracked. He planned to dismiss me. Said I knew too much about the African accounts, irregularities. I begged him to reconsider. That letter was private. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Private enough to kill for. She stood abruptly. I loved him, monsieur. Not enough to poison him. She fled, the door banging behind her. Jonathan Harrington was last. He reeked of brandy and sleeplessness, his dress shirt open at the throat. He collapsed into the chair as though his bones had dissolved. Japp wasted no time. You were seen near the cellar at 11. Jonathan rubbed his eyes. Needed air. Went to the gun room. Thought a walk on the moor might clear my head. Came back through the kitchen. That's all. Poirot's voice was gentle. Your debts, monsieur. White's, Brooks, a money-lender in Jermyn Street. Your father threatened disinheritance? Jonathan laughed bitterly. Every week. Said he'd leave everything to the African mission. I was in the library at 11:20, reading The Sporting Life. Heard the scream, ran. Japp produced a betting slip from the wastebasket. Dated yesterday. $500 on a horse called Bankrupt Boy. Desperate measures? Jonathan's hands shook. I wished him dead 1,000 times, but I didn't kill him. Poirot leaned close. The study key. Was there a duplicate? Only one. Father kept it on his watch chain. Jonathan's voice cracked. Always. Japp closed his notebook. Right. No one leaves the house. Poirot. The Belgian stood at the window, watching rain begin to lash the glass. 4 suspects, 4 motives, 1 locked room. The little grey cells. They are hungry, Japp. By luncheon, we feed them. Outside, the Moor drank the rain and gave nothing back. Chapter 5. The Hidden Clue. The rain had settled into a steady, mournful drumming, as though the sky itself wept for Sir Reginald. By 9 o'clock, the billiard room had become a hive of subdued activity. Constables cataloguing fingerprints, a photographer's magnesium flashes popping like summer lightning. Dr. Lang summoned at last, pronouncing death by hydrocyanic acid poisoning between 11:15 and 11:25. Poirot, dismissed temporarily by Japp's machinery, slipped away to the scene of the crime. The study smelled of bitter almonds, wet wool, and the faint metallic tang of blood, where Sir Reginald's forehead had struck the brass inkstand. The body had been removed to the ice-house. Only a chalk outline remained, grotesque as a child's drawing. Poirot circled it slowly, cane tapping, eyes cataloguing every detail with the devotion of a priest at vespers. He began with the desk. The ledger lay open to a page of furious calculations, columns of red ink bleeding into one another. A fountain pen, gold-nibbed, had rolled to the edge and left a scarlet comma on the blotter. Poirot lifted it delicately. The nib was bent, as though used to pry something open. Beneath the blotter he found a single red wax flake, thin as a communion wafer. From the decanter seal he noted, but not adhering to the cork. Curious. The decanter itself stood on its silver tray, 2/3 empty. Poirot held it to the window's grey light. Inside, a faint sediment swirled. Port should be clear. He stoppered it with a gloved thumb and inverted it gently. A pinhead of liquid seeped through the puncture in the cork, staining his glove the colour of rust. Injected, he confirmed, but when and by whom? He turned to the fireplace. The shattered tumbler had been swept into a dustpan, but one shard remained, caught in the fringe of the hearthrug. Poirot knelt, ignoring the protest of his knees, and retrieved it with tweezers. On the inner curve, a smear of crimson, not port, lipstick, Lady Evelyn's shade, he thought, or another's. A soft cough behind him. Clara Thorne stood in the doorway, spectacles reflecting the overcast light like twin moons. She clutched a small tin box, the kind used for throat lozenges. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Japp said I might retrieve Sir Reginald's correspondence. The Nairobi solicitor cables hourly. Poirot rose smoothly. Mademoiselle, you are prompt in grief, most admirable. He gestured to the desk. But first, indulge me. This tin, yours? Clara's fingers tightened. Mine, fisherman's friend. Sir Reginald suffered hoarseness after dinners. I kept them here. She opened the lid. The pastilles were ordinary, menthol sharp, but beneath the top layer lay a glass vial, no larger than a little finger, stoppered with black rubber. A handwritten label, KCN, 5 gras. Poirot's moustache quivered. Potassium cyanide, for photographic developing, perhaps. Clara paled. For vermin. The cellars flood in winter, rats come up. Sir Reginald ordered it from the chemist in Ashford last Michaelmas. I locked it in the safe. Her voice cracked. Fingerprints. Mine will be on it. Indeed. Poirot lifted the vial with a handkerchief. And the safe combination. His birthday. 14/03/73. Only he and I knew it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet someone else knew, or watched you open it. He replaced the vial. Tell me, mademoiselle, when you passed the study at 11:10, did Sir Reginald speak? He complained of headache. Said the port would help. I offered aspirin. He refused. Her gaze flicked to the decanter. I should have insisted. Poirot patted her arm with surprising gentleness. Regret is a luxury we cannot afford. Go, but leave the tin. Clara fled. Poirot pocketed the vial and moved to the bookshelves. Rows of Morocco-bound volumes on mining law, big game hunting, and incongruously, a slim volume of Keats. He ran a finger along the spines. One protruded a fraction, the memoirs of Casanova in French. He eased it out. Inside, a cavity had been cut into the pages. Empty, but lined with tissue paper stained faintly blue. Cyanide crystals dissolved to prussic acid in moist air, he mused. A perfect hiding place until needed. A footstep on the gravel outside. Poirot crossed to the window. Jonathan Harrington, collar turned up against the rain, was hurrying toward the stables. In his hand, something glinted, a key. Poirot watched him disappear into the mist, then turned back to the room. The wastebasket yielded more, the torn corner of a telegram. Arrive Wednesday. Stop urgent. Will stop Lang. Sent yesterday, 3:12 p.m. And beneath it, a betting slip. Bankrupt boy, 500 to 1, placed 10 November. Jonathan's desperation in ink. Poirot was photographing the desk with his miniature Kodak when Wilkins appeared, umbrella dripping. Begging your pardon, sir. The gamekeeper found this by the east gate. He held out a kid glove, left hand, monogrammed EB in faded gold thread. Damp, but the fingers stained with fresh mud. Mr. Black's? Poirot asked. His, sir. Wore them at dinner. Said he lost one on the terrace. Poirot turned the glove inside out. In the thumb, a tiny tear, and caught in the lining, a single red wax flake identical to the one on the blotter. Black was in the rose garden, Poirot thought, but the study windows are barred. He thanked Wilkins and pocketed the glove. Time to test alibis against geography. In the entrance hall he encountered Lady Evelyn descending the stairs, a black veil shielding her face. She paused. Monsieur Poirot, Dr. Lang is with Reginald now. He wishes to speak with you. Presently, madame. First, a question. Your lipstick. Rouge baiser, no? The shade is distinctive. She lifted the veil. Her mouth was bare. I removed it after dinner. Morning, you understand. Her eyes searched his. Why? Poirot bowed. A detail, nothing more. He watched her glide toward the drawing-room, then beckoned a constable. Follow her ladyship discreetly. Note if she visits the muniments room. Upstairs, in the late baronet's dressing-room, Poirot examined the row of boots lined like soldiers. One pair, brown brogues, bore traces of red clay on the soles, the same clay that floored the rose garden path. Size 10, black size. But Jonathan wore 11s, Sir Reginald 9s, curiouser and curiouser. A soft knock. Dr. Victor Lang entered, medical bag in hand, face haggard beneath a travelling ulster. He was tall, ascetic, with the stooped shoulders of a man who had spent too many nights bent over microscopes. Monsieur Poirot, Evelyn, Lady Harrington, said you wished to see me. Doctor. Poirot indicated a chair. Sir Reginald's heart condition, digitalis. Lang nodded. Arrhythmia, exacerbated by stress. I prescribed tincture of digitalis, 1 minim thrice daily. Last refill, Friday. He opened his bag, produced a brown bottle, half full. He was to take it with water, never alcohol. Poirot sniffed the bottle. Foxglove, sharp and green. And cyanide? Any medical use? Photography, or, in extremis, euthanasia, though illegal. Lang's voice was steady, but his fingers drummed the bag. I keep a small amount for developing X-rays, locked in my surgery. Your surgery, 20 miles away. Yet you were expected last night. Fog closed the roads. I telephoned at 9. Lang met Poirot's gaze. I arrived at 6 this morning, too late. Poirot produced the vial from Clara's tin. This matches your label stock? Lang examined it. Identical, but the batch number. Mine ends in 47, this is 42. Older stock. He hesitated. Reginald ordered photographic supplies himself sometimes, from Harrods. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the new will? You were to witness it? Lang flushed. He asked me last week. Said Jonathan was squandering the estate. Wanted everything to a trust, Evelyn as lifetime tenant, remainder to medical charities. I refused to witness without seeing Jonathan. Ethics, you understand. Yet you arrive the morning after his death. Convenient timing, docteur. Lang stood. "I loved Evelyn once. Before Reginald. He knew. Blackmailed me with an old scandal. Opium during the war. I paid. But murder?" His laugh was bitter. "I save lives, monsieur. I do not take them." Poirot watched him go, then returned to the study. On the blotter, beneath the chalk outline, something glinted. A single cufflink, gold, engraved with a tiny pickaxe. Sir Reginald's. But the clasp was broken, as though torn off in a struggle. Poirot pocketed it. The little grey cells were assembling their mosaic. A syringe, a vial, a glove, a lipstick smear, a torn cufflink, a hidden cavity in Casanova. And somewhere in the house, a duplicate key, or a clever substitute. He stood at the window, rain streaking the glass like tears. Outside, the rose garden lay sodden, petals bruised and fallen. And there, half buried in the mud beneath the barred window, something white caught his eye. A scrap of paper, sodden but legible. He opened the casement, reached through the bars with his cane and hooked it. A telegram blank, torn in half. The remaining text, "Amit me cellar. 10:45, stop urgent, stop J.J. Jonathan, or another." Poirot folded the paper carefully. The net was tightening. But the fish still believed itself in open water. Chapter 6. Shadows of Deception. The rain had softened to a whisper by noon, but the sky remained the colour of wet slate. In the library, Hercule Poirot stood before the great fireplace, warming his hands at a fire that crackled with more enthusiasm than the household could muster. On the mantel, a bronze bust of Cecil Rhodes glowered down, as though personally offended by the morning's events. Poirot regarded it with the mild contempt he reserved for empire builders, who mistook ruthlessness for destiny. Inspector Japp entered, rubbing his hands. Post-mortem confirms cyanide, massive dose. Stomach contents, port, pheasant, a trace of digitalis. Time of death, 11:18 to 11:22. No needle mark on the body, so the syringe theory holds. Labs testing the decanter sediment should have results by tea. Poirot nodded. Excellent, mon ami. But science is the servant of psychology. We deal with minds twisted like corkscrews. He produced the torn telegram scrap. Found beneath the study window. Meet me cellar 10:45. Stop urgent, stop J. Someone lured Sir Reginald, or believed they did. Japp whistled. Jonathan's initial, or a forgery. Let's shake the tree. They began with the cellar. A stone stair spiraled down from the scullery, the air growing colder and damper with each step. The wine vault was a cathedral of dust and cobwebs, racks of bottles receding into shadow like the ribs of some fossilized beast. Poirot's pocket torch picked out the slot where the fatal 21 port had rested. Empty now, but the rack beside it bore fresh scratches, as though a bottle had been hastily replaced. Japp knelt. Look, footprints in the coal dust. Small, lady's shoe, size 4. He measured with his notebook. Lady Evelyn's? Or Miss Thorne's, Poirot murmured. Both wear similar court shoes. But observe, the heel is worn on the outer edge. Mademoiselle Thorne favours her left foot, her ladyship the right. A constable appeared with a cardboard box. From the muniments room, sir. Miss Thorne said you'd want these. Inside, ledgers, a forged share certificate in Elias Black's name, and, nested in cotton wool, a brass skeleton key, newly cut. Poirot turned it in his gloved fingers. The study duplicate, made yesterday at Ashford Hardware. Wilkins saw Jonathan leave the house at 3 p.m. to post letters, he claimed. The key gleamed with the innocence of fresh metal. Upstairs, the search of bedrooms yielded further fruit. In Jonathan's dressing room, beneath a pile of racing periodicals, lay a hypodermic syringe in a velvet-lined case, medical, with a fine needle. The plunger was sticky with dried port. In Clara's room, a diary bound in Morocco leather, its lock forced. Pages of anguished confession. He promised we would be together once the new will was signed. E lies. She will never let him go. A pressed violet marked the entry dated 9th November. Lady Evelyn's boudoir offered subtler clues. A half-burned letter in the grate. Cannot continue the deception. R suspects. Meet me cellar tonight, or all is lost. V. The handwriting matched Dr. Lang's prescription pad. And in her jewel case, a hollow signet ring, gold, the bezel unscrewing to reveal a cavity large enough for a few grains of powder. Empty. Elias Black's room was Spartan. Ledgers, a revolver in a holster, and, tucked into a copy of the Stock Exchange Gazette, a photograph of Sir Reginald shaking hands with a portly American in a Stetson. On the reverse, scrawled in pencil, "Offer accepted. Tombners, close Friday." R.H. Poirot gathered the suspects in the long gallery at 2 o'clock. The tall windows admitting a watery light that turned faces to parchment. Japp stood beside the door, arms folded. 2 constables flanked the fireplace. The air was thick with the scent of wet wool and apprehension. "Mesdames, monsieur," Poirot began, pacing before the ancestral portraits. "We assemble the pieces. Sir Reginald was poisoned by cyanide, introduced into a sealed bottle of port. The bottle was fetched from the cellar at 6:30, sealed. It was opened in the study at 11:10, approximately, by Sir Reginald himself. He drank and died within minutes. The door was locked from within, the key on his chain. Yet the poison was not in the bottle when it left the cellar. Someone tampered with it later." He held up the skeleton key. "This opened the study after Sir Reginald retired. Someone entered, perhaps to talk, perhaps to kill. But the locked room, how?" Jonathan shifted. "The bars on the windows are ornamental," Poirot finished. "The centre pane lifts out, a glazier's trick. Mr. Black's glove, found in the rose garden, proves someone stood beneath the window. But the poison was already in the bottle." Clara's voice was a thread. "The syringe was used in the cellar," Poirot said. "Between 10:45 and 11. The footprints prove a woman was present. But whose?" Lady Evelyn's fan snapped shut. "Mine, perhaps. I walked the garden after dinner. The air was close." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yet your shoes are clean, madame, and the heel wear is wrong." He turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you were seen leaving the muniments room at 11:10. You passed the study, Sir Reginald alive. But you returned to the cellar at 10:50, non? To meet someone." Clara's spectacles flashed. I went for more paper. The stationery cupboard is beside the vault. Convenient." Poirot produced the diary. "You write of a promise. Sir Reginald would marry you once the new will disinherited Jonathan. But he changed his mind, oui? Threatened to dismiss you for embezzlement. The forged shares in Mr. Black's name." Clara's hands flew to her mouth. "He forgave me. Said we would leave for Kenya together. Yet the will remained unchanged," Poirot said softly. "And Dr. Lang refused to witness it. You panicked." Jonathan laughed, a cracked sound. "Clara, the mouse, she couldn't—" Poirot silenced him with a look. "Mice gnaw, monsieur, and they carry plague." He held up the hollow ring. "This belonged to your mother, Lady Evelyn. Given to you, perhaps, for safekeeping. It contained cyanide, enough for one fatal dose, dissolved in the port as Sir Reginald poured." Lady Evelyn rose, regal even in grief. "You accused me with a trinket." "No, madame, with science." Poirot produced the lipstick-smeared shard. "Your shade, Transferred when you kissed your husband good night. On the mouth, a habit remarked by Wilkins. The poison was in the ring, released by pressure as you embraced him in the study. You left, locked the door with the duplicate key, and returned to your room. The groan Lady Evelyn heard was the onset of convulsions. Black snorted. Preposterous! Evelyn was with us when the scream— No. She was in the corridor at 11:15, yes, but the scream came at 11:21. Time enough to stage discovery. Poirot turned to Dr. Lang, who had entered quietly. Doctor, you telephoned at 9, but the exchange logs show a call at 10:40 from the village kiosk. You were already en route. To meet Sir Reginald, or to silence him? Lang's face was ash. He summoned me, said he had proof of my opium smuggling, enough to ruin me. I arrived at 11, entered by the garden door. He was pouring the port. I begged him to destroy the evidence. He laughed, drank. Lang's voice broke. I saw the foam, knew. I fled. Poirot's voice was gentle. You left him to die, but you did not poison him. He faced them all. The murderer is among us, but the method was collective. Clara prepared the syringe, desperate to keep her lover. Jonathan provided the key, hoping to steal the new will. Mr. Black planted the glove, misdirection. Dr. Lang supplied the cyanide, believing it for photography. Lady Evelyn administered it in a kiss of death. Silence, broken only by the rain. Then Clara laughed, high, hysterical. You cannot prove. Poirot held up the cufflink. Sir Reginald tore this from his killer's sleeve in his death throes. The thread matches your dressing gown, Lady Evelyn. Gold with a pickaxe, the Harrington crest. You kept it as a memento. Lady Evelyn's composure shattered. He was a monster. 20 years of cruelty, infidelity, threats. Victor loved me. He would have taken me away. Reginald found the ring, laughed, said he'd wear it to his grave. She sank to the sofa, sobbing. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Lady Evelyn Harrington, I arrest you, but Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Japp, one more piece. He turned to the portrait of Sir Reginald. The scratched photograph, the African foreman, Kipsang. He did not steal. He discovered the embezzlement, Clara's forgeries. Sir Reginald silenced him with a bribe, then erased his face. But the truth, it bleeds through. He faced Clara. You poisoned the port in the cellar, believing Sir Reginald would drink alone. But Lady Evelyn's kiss was the final twist. Clara collapsed, weeping. Jonathan stared at his hands as though seeing blood. Black lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. Lang stood motionless, a man condemned by his own silence. Poirot sighed. The perfect crime, mes amis, is never perfect. It is merely the one where the criminals believe their own deceptions. Outside, the rain ceased. A single shaft of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the gallery like a spotlight on a stage where the final act had just played out. Chapter 7. Unravelling Threads. The long gallery had become a confessional. Rainwater dripped from the leaded panes, ticking like a metronome counting down to judgment. Lady Evelyn sat crumpled on the sofa, veil discarded, her face stripped of its aristocratic mask and raw with 20 years of suppressed fury. Clara Thorne knelt beside her, spectacles fogged with tears, clutching the Morocco diary as though it were a hymnal. Jonathan Harrington stood at the window, staring at the sodden moor as if it might offer escape. Elias Black smoked incessantly, the cigarette trembling between fingers that had signed too many dishonest contracts. Dr. Victor Lang leaned against a suit of armour. Eyes closed, the weight of complicity bowing his shoulders. Inspector Japp's handcuffs glinted, but Poirot's raised palm held him in check. Patience, mon ami. The tapestry is not yet complete. One thread remains tangled. He moved to the centre of the room, cane tapping a slow rhythm on the parquet. We have motives in abundance. Lady Evelyn's marital prison, Mademoiselle Thorne's betrayed love, Monsieur Jonathan's debts, Monsieur Black's embezzlement, Dr. Lang's blackmail. We have means, the cyanide vial, the syringe, the duplicate key, the hollow ring, have opportunity, the cellar rendezvous, the study entry, the garden window. Yet the timing, the timing refuses to lie flat. Poirot produced his pocket watch, flipped it open. Sir Reginald retired to the study at 10:45. Mademoiselle Thorne passed the door at 11:10. He was alive, pouring port. The groan was heard at 11:21. Death at 11:22. 37 minutes from retirement to poison. But the cyanide acts in minutes, 3 to 5 for a lethal dose. Therefore, the poison was administered after 11:10. Yet the door was locked from within, the key on the chain. How? He turned to Clara. You claim you saw him pour the port at 11:10. Describe the bottle. Clara's voice was a whisper. Green glass, gold foil at the neck, red wax seal intact. He broke the wax with his penknife, drew the cork. The pop echoed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet the cork in evidence shows a puncture made before the seal was broken. The wax would have sealed the hole. Therefore, the bottle you saw was not the fatal one, a substitute. Jonathan spun from the window. Impossible. The 21 was unique, father's pride. Unique in the rack, oui, but not in the cellar. Poirot gestured to Japp, who produced a second bottle from an evidence box. Identical label, wax seal broken, cork intact but punctured. Found behind the coal bunker. The real 21. The substitute, poisoned, was switched in the study after 11:10. Black crushed his cigarette. Then someone entered after Clara left. Exactement. Poirot held up the skeleton key. This fits the study lock, made yesterday, but observe, he inserted it into an imaginary lock, turned it slowly. The wards are worn. It sticks. Takes 10 seconds to turn. The intruder needed time. He faced Lady Evelyn. You walked the long gallery at 11:15. Wilkins saw you. But the study door opens onto the gallery. You had the key. She lifted her chin. I had nothing. I heard the groan, rattled the handle, screamed. Poirot's voice softened. Yet the handle was cold. Wilkins tested it after. If you had rattled it at 11:21, your hand would have warmed the brass. It was cold because you rattled it earlier, at 11:12 perhaps, then returned to your room to establish distance. Lady Evelyn's composure cracked. You twist facts like a barrister. Facts do not twist. People do. Poirot produced the lipstick-smeared shard. This was found under the desk, not the hearth. It fell when you leaned over Sir Reginald to kiss him, after he drank from the substitute bottle. The real bottle you hid in your muff, later planting it in the cellar to confuse. Dr. Lang stirred. Evelyn, Lady Harrington, could not have carried a bottle in her evening gown. Poirot smiled. But in her fan, oui. The ivory sticks unscrew. A hollow compartment, large enough for a half-pint flask. Produced the fan from evidence, demonstrated the mechanism. A faint almond scent lingered. Clara sobbed. She used me. I prepared the syringe for the real bottle, thinking Sir Reginald would drink alone. She switched them while I waited in the cellar. Poirot nodded. You met at 10:50, as the telegram instructed. J was not Jonathan, but Jocasta, Lady Evelyn's middle name, known to you from correspondence. She took the syringe, promised to protect you. Instead, she used the poison herself. Jonathan laughed bitterly. "So I forged the key for nothing. Thought I'd steal the will, burn it, save my inheritance." Black's voice was hoarse. "And I planted the glove to frame Jonathan. Thought he'd done it. We're all accomplices in our own way." Poirot turned to Lang. "Docteur, you arrived at 11, entered by the garden door, unlocked, as always for your late visits. You found Sir Reginald convulsing, the substitute bottle on the tray. You recognized the cyanide, your old batch. You fled, leaving him to die, to protect your secret." Lang's head bowed. "I am guilty of cowardice, not murder." Poirot faced Japp. The crime was Evelyn's alone, but nourished by the other's greed and fear. She planned to frame Clara, the vial in the tin, the diary left unlocked. The hollow ring was insurance, unused. He produced the cufflink. This Sir Reginald tore from her sleeve as she leaned over him, her morning dress, black jet buttons shaped like pickaxes. One missing, found in the rose garden, where she discarded it. Lady Evelyn stood, regal even in defeat. "He beat me for 20 years, controlled every penny, every breath. Victor offered escape. Reginald found the ring, laughed, said he'd wear my poison to his grave. I gave him his wish." Silence fell, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Lady Evelyn Harrington, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Reginald Harrington." She offered her wrists without resistance. "At last, I am free." As constables led her away, Poirot addressed the others. "Monsieur Jonathan, your debts remain, but the estate is yours, burdened by death duties. Monsieur Black, the forged shares will be investigated. Mademoiselle Thorne, accessory after the fact. Perhaps a lighter sentence. Dr. Lang, cowardice is not a crime, but conscience is a harsh judge." Clara wept. "He promised me Kenya." Poirot's voice was gentle. "Promises, mademoiselle, are like port, best when genuine, fatal when adulterated." He turned to the window. The clouds had parted. A shaft of winter sunlight illuminated the moor, turning the heather to flame. Somewhere a curlew called, its cry no longer mournful, but triumphant. Japp clapped him on the shoulder. "Another locked room cracked, Poirot. How do you do it?" The little Belgian smoothed his moustache. "Order and method, mon ami, and the knowledge that every thread, when pulled, reveals the weave of human weakness." Outside, the Daimler waited to take him back to the world of trains and Tisane. But for a moment he lingered, watching Lady Evelyn's silhouette disappear into the police car. Justice, he reflected, was a bit of vintage, but vintage nonetheless. Chapter 8. The Dark Twist. The afternoon light in the drawing room was the colour of weak tea, filtered through clouds that refused to decide between rain and surrender. The fire had been laid but not lit. No one had the heart for warmth. Hercule Poirot stood at the grand piano, one gloved finger tracing the ivory keys without pressing them. The silence was not peaceful. It was the silence of a battlefield, after the guns fall still, when the wounded begin to moan. Lady Evelyn Harrington had been taken to Ashford Police Station an hour earlier. The others remained under guard in the long gallery, their alibis shredded, their secrets laid bare like anatomical specimens. Yet Poirot's moustache bristled with dissatisfaction. Something in the pattern still jarred, like a single wrong note in a Chopin nocturne. Inspector Japp entered, rubbing chilled hands. "Charges filed, murder 1, Lady Evelyn, accessory for Clara Thorne. The rest, conspiracy, forgery, withholding evidence, Crown prosecutors licking his chops. You cracked it, Poirot." The Belgian turned, eyes glittering. "Non, mon ami, I have cracked a case, but not the case. Observe." He gestured to the coffee table, where evidence lay in neat rows. The substitute bottle, The syringe, the hollow fan, the cufflink, the torn telegram. All point to Lady Evelyn, yet one piece does not fit. He lifted the cufflink, the gold pickaxe, its clasp broken. This was torn from the killer's sleeve in the death struggle. Lady Evelyn wore jet buttons, black, rounded, no pickaxe, and the thread he held it to the light hood is crimson silk. Her morning gown is bombazine, matte, no silk. Japp frowned. Planted evidence? Or the wrong murderer? Poirot paced. The substitute bottle was switched after 11:10. Clara saw Sir Reginald pour from the sealed 21. Therefore, the killer entered after Clara left the study, before the groan at 11:21. Lady Evelyn was seen in the long gallery at 11:15 by Wilkins. She could not be in two places. He stopped before the fireplace, where a small oil portrait of Sir Reginald in his 30s glowered down, eyes sharp, mouth cruel. Sir Reginald was not a man to drink alone without purpose. He summoned someone to the study after dinner. Who? Japp produced a fresh evidence bag. Found this in the rose garden, under the window. A woman's handkerchief. Lace, monogrammed CT soaked in port. Clara Thorne, Japp said triumphantly. She was in the garden. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet Clara's handkerchiefs are linen, initialed in white. This is silk batiste, embroidered in gold, expensive, and the port, why soak it? He took the handkerchief, sniffed. Beneath the wine, a faint chemical trace ether. Ah, not port alone. Ether to subdue. The killer brought Sir Reginald into the study unconscious, staged the poisoning. Japp whistled. But the door was locked from within. Listen. Poirot led him to the study. The door stood ajar, the lock gleaming. He closed it, shot the bolt. The key is on the inside, but observe the escutcheon plate. He pointed to a hairline crack. Loose, a thin blade, say, a letter opener, inserted here, can lift the bolt from outside. The killer locked it after leaving. He demonstrated with a silver opener from the desk. The bolt slid back with a soft click. The groan Lady Evelyn heard was Sir Reginald reviving, too late, the poison already swallowed. Japp's pipe drooped. So Clara prepared the syringe, yes, but did not administer it. Poirot returned to the drawing-room, where the others had been brought under guard. Clara sat hunched. Jonathan paced. Black stared into the cold grate. Lang stood apart, face grey. Poirot addressed them. The true killer is cunning. They used Lady Evelyn's ring as a blind, Clara's vial as a pointer, Jonathan's key as misdirection. But the handkerchief, CT, is the signature. Clara looked up, bewildered. That's not mine. Poirot's gaze swept the room and settled on a small table where a silver tray held decanters and glasses. One glass, half full of port, stood apart. Who poured this? Wilkins, hovering by the door, cleared his throat. Miss Thorne, sir. After her ladyship was taken, said she needed a drop for shock. Poirot lifted the glass, swirled it. The sediment matched the substitute bottle. He sniffed. Almonds, faint but unmistakable. Cyanide, enough for a second murder. Clara gasped. I poured from the decanter on the sideboard. Which was tampered with after the police search, Poirot said. The killer planned a second death, to silence the one who knew too much. He turned to Clara. You met someone in the cellar at 10:50. Not Lady Evelyn. Who? Clara's voice trembled. He said his name was Carter, a solicitor from London. Said Sir Reginald had summoned him to witness the will. Gave me the syringe, told me to inject the real bottle. Said it was a sedative, to calm Sir Reginald before signing. Jonathan laughed, a cracked sound. Carter, there's no... Poirot silenced him. Describe this Carter. Tall, dark overcoat, scar across the left cheek, spoke like an educated man. Poirot's eyes widened. Mon Dieu! The African foreman Kipsang. The photograph scratched out. He did not steal. He was framed, sent to prison, released last month. Revenge. He spun to Black. You recognized him in the garden. Planted your glove to frame Jonathan, but Kipsang was the shadow you saw. Black's cigarette fell. I thought it was a servant. Poirot ignored him, addressing Lang. Doctor, your opium scandal. Kipsang supplied the drugs in Johannesburg. Sir Reginald betrayed him to the authorities. You knew. Lang nodded slowly. He came to my surgery last week. Threatened exposure unless I helped him reach Reginald. I refused. Poirot faced the room. Kipsang entered as Carter, used Clara's devotion, staged the poisoning with the substitute bottle. He forced Sir Reginald to drink at gunpoint, explains the ether on the handkerchief to subdue him first, locked the door with the letter opener trick, escaped through the garden. He produced a small object from his pocket, a brass button, engraved with a pickaxe. Found in the rose garden mud, from Kipsang's coat, stolen from Sir Reginald's old mining gear in the attic. He wore it as irony. Jap was already on the telephone. Roadblocks, description, tall African, scar on left cheek, possibly armed. Poirot turned to Clara. You were the dupe, mademoiselle. Kipsang planned to kill you next, silence the witness. The port on the sideboard was his insurance. Clara wept. He said it was justice. The door burst open, a constable breathless. Sir, the stables, fresh hoofprints leading to the moor, a horse taken, and this, he held out a scrap of paper, torn from a ledger. The white man's justice is a rope. Now the rope is mine. K. Poirot folded the note carefully. He rides to the old tin mine, abandoned workings 3 miles north. He knows the tunnels. Jap grabbed his coat. Cars, dogs, we'll have him by dusk. Poirot remained by the piano, fingers still on the keys. He pressed middle C, pure, resonant. The dark twist, mes amis, is that revenge is a symphony. Kipsang composed it note by note, but the final cadence, he struck a minor chord, discordant, chilling. Belongs to justice. Outside, engines roared to life. The hunt was on. And in the drawing room, the fire was lit at last, its flames dancing like the ghosts of empire, consuming the last illusions of Harrington Manor. Chapter 9. Confrontation in the Storm. The storm broke just after 4, as if the heavens had waited for the hunt to begin. Black clouds rolled in from the Atlantic, swallowing the pale winter sun, and the wind came howling across the moor like a banshee cheated of its prey. Rain lashed the windows of Harrington Manor in horizontal sheets, drumming on the slate roof with the fury of a regimental tattoo. Inside, the drawing room was a tableau of exhaustion. Clara Thorne curled in an armchair, eyes swollen. Jonathan Harrington nursing a brandy he no longer tasted. Elias Black pacing, cigarette ash scattering like grey snow. Dr. Lang staring into the unlit hearth as though it held the ashes of his career. Hercule Poirot stood at the French windows, watching the police convoy, 3 Morris cars and a lorry with kennelled hounds, vanish into the murk. Inspector Japp had taken the wheel of the lead vehicle. Bowler had clamped tight, pipe clenched like a battle standard. Poirot had declined to join the chase. One does not catch a leopard by running after it, he murmured to the glass. One sets the trap and waits. His reflection stared back, small, immaculate, the waxed moustache defiant against the chaos outside. A constable approached, dripping. Telephone, sir. Ashford Station. They've found the horse, lathered, tethered at the old tin workings. Tracks lead into the main adit. Jap's gone in with 6 men and the dogs. Poirot nodded. Tell him to proceed with caution. Kip Sang knows those tunnels like his own veins. There are side shafts, flooded sumps, false floors. A man could vanish, or engineer an avalanche. The constable saluted and hurried off. Poirot turned to the room. "Mesdames, messieurs, the climax approaches, but first we tighten the net here." Kip Sang did not act alone. Clara looked up, voice hoarse. "He used me. I thought it was love, Sir Reginald's love. Kip Sang said the poison was a sleeping draught, that Reginald would sign the will making me his heiress. Then we'd flee to Kenya. I was a fool," Jonathan snorted. "We're all fools. I forged the key to steal a will that doesn't exist. Father burned the new one yesterday, told me in the gun room. Said I'd get nothing but debts." Black crushed his cigarette in a crystal ashtray. "And I cook the books to buy time. Reginald was selling to Americans, would have exposed everything. Kip Sang's revenge was convenient. I planted the glove to point at Jonathan." Lang spoke for the first time, voice hollow. "I supplied the cyanide years ago, medical grade, for photographic plates in the Johannesburg clinic. Kip Sang stole it when Reginald had him arrested. I thought it destroyed." Poirot raised a hand. "Silence. The pieces fit, yet one shadow remains. Kip Sang needed access to the house after the murder, to poison the sideboard decanter, to watch, to strike again. Someone harboured him." He crossed to the bell pull and rang. Wilkins appeared, face pale beneath his butler's dignity. "Sir, Monsieur Wilkins, you have served this house 15 years. You knew Kip Sang in Johannesburg. Second footman, yes? Before the incident?" Wilkins stiffened. "He was dismissed for theft, sir. I testified. Yet you saw him last night. On the terrace, 11 o'clock, you brought him brandy in the gun room after the scream. Why?" Wilkins' composure cracked. "He had a knife at my throat in the pantry. Said he'd kill my wife in the village if I didn't hide him. I locked him in the wine cellar after the police search. Gave him food. He escaped at dawn. Took the horse." Poirot's eyes were steel. "You chose family over duty. Understandable. But now, the map." He spread an ordnance survey on the piano. Yellowed, annotated in Sir Reginald's hand. "The tin mine. Main adit. Here. Collapses here. Ventilation shaft here. Leads to the old smelting shed. 200 yards from the stable yard. Kip Sang will double back. He knows the more roads are watched." A rumble of thunder shook the windows. The lights flickered, died, then steadied on the emergency generator. Poirot lit a candle from the mantel. "We set the trap in the smelting shed. Constable, telephone Jap. Divert 2 cars to the shed, quietly." The constable departed. Poirot turned to the others. "You will remain here. Wilkins, lock the doors. No one leaves." He donned his overcoat, retrieved his cane, and slipped out through the garden door. The storm hit him like a physical blow, rain stinging his cheeks, wind tearing at his hat. He battled across the stable yard, boots sinking in mud, until the smelting shed loomed, a skeletal ruin of corrugated iron and rotting beams. The door hung ajar. Inside, darkness pulsed. Poirot entered, candle raised. The air was thick with rust and wet earth. Rusted machinery crouched like sleeping beasts. Chains dangled from rafters, clinking in the draught. In the centre, a cold forge. Beside it, a wooden crate freshly pried open. Inside, a coil of rope, a lantern, a Webley revolver. Footsteps behind him. He turned, candle guttering. Kip Sang stood in the doorway, soaked oilskins gleaming, the scar livid across his cheek. In his hand, a mining pick. "Monsieur Poirot." His voice was soft, cultured, the accent of an English public school overlaid with the cadence of the veldt. "You are predictable, the little Belgian who sees everything." Poirot set the candle on the forge. "And you, Monsieur Kip Sang, are magnificent, a symphony of vengeance, but symphonies end. Kip Sang stepped forward, pick raised. Reginald destroyed me, framed me for theft, sent me to prison for 7 years. My wife died in childbirth while I rotted. He laughed when I begged for mercy. Now he is dead by his own poison. Poirot's voice was calm. You used Clara's love, Jonathan's greed, Black's fear, Lang's guilt, Wilkins's terror. You staged the locked room, the substitute bottle, the ether, the handkerchief, but you underestimated the order of the little grey cells. Kip Sang's eyes flicked to the crate. The revolver is loaded. 1 bullet for you, 1 for me. The police will find 2 corpses, murder-suicide. The Harringtons will pay forever. He lunged. Poirot sidestepped with surprising agility. The pick shattered the crate, splinters flying. Poirot's cane lashed out, striking Kip Sang's wrist. The pick clattered away. They grappled, Kip Sang's strength against Poirot's precision. The candle toppled, extinguishing in a puddle. Darkness, the storm's roar. Then, headlights piercing the shed door, engines growling. Japp's voice, Poirot, stand clear! Kip Sang broke free, snatched the revolver. Poirot dove behind the forge as the shot cracked, deafening in the confined space. Plaster exploded above his head. Then torch beams swept in. Japp, constables, dogs straining at leashes. Drop it, Japp barked. Kip Sang fired again, wild. A constable grunted, fell. Another shot, Japp's service revolver. Kip Sang spun, blood blooming on his shoulder. He staggered, raised the Webley to his temple. Poirot's voice cut through the chaos. No! Justice, not suicide. You will testify. Expose the Empire's crimes. Live to see them crumble. Kip Sang hesitated. The dogs lunged. He dropped the gun, sank to his knees in the mud. Constables swarmed, cuffs clicking. Japp helped Poirot up. Cutting it fine, old friend. Poirot brushed mud from his coat. The leopard is caught, mon ami, but the jungle remains. Outside, the storm began to ease. A ragged edge of sky appeared, the colour of bruised violets. Kip Sang was led to the lorry, head high despite the blood. Clara watched from the manor steps, tears mingling with rain. Jonathan turned away. Black lit another cigarette with shaking hands. Lang stood apart, a man absolved yet broken. Poirot paused at the shed door, looking back at the forge where the candle had died. The dark twist, he said softly, is that revenge and justice wear the same mask. Only the motive differs. As the convoy pulled away, the Moor exhaled. Somewhere, a curlew called, clear, triumphant. The storm had passed, but the echoes of gunshots and dying empires would linger in the tin mine tunnels for years to come. Chapter 10. Resolution and reflection. The storm had spent itself by dawn, leaving the moor washed clean and glittering under a sky the colour of polished steel. Harrington Manor stood silent, its chimneys no longer smoking, as though the house itself held its breath after the night's violence. In the stable yard, constables loaded evidence crates into a police van. The hounds, exhausted, lay curled in their kennels. Kip Sang, bandaged, handcuffed, yet unbowed, had been driven away under heavy guard to face trial in London. The newspapers would feast for weeks. African foreman's revenge, Empire's dark secret exposed. Hercule Poirot lingered in the breakfast room, a final cup of tisane steaming beside a plate untouched, except for a single croissant dissected with surgical precision. He wore his travelling suit, charcoal grey, impeccable despite the mud and gunpowder of the smelting shed. His valise stood packed by the door, the photograph of the Countess tucked safely within. Inspector Japp entered, stamping wet boots, bowler hat dripping. Charges filed, Japp announced, helping himself to coffee from the silver pot. Kip Sang for murder 1, Clara Thorne accessory before and after, Wilkins obstruction, Lady Evelyn, well, she's confessed to concealing evidence, but the Crown's dropping murder. She was Kipsang's dupe in the end. Jonathan keeps the estate, minus death duties that'll swallow half. Black's facing fraud in the city. Lang's license is suspended pending. Inquiry. Clean sweep, Poirot. Poirot sipped his tisane, eyes half closed. Clean, mon ami. Justice is never clean. It leaves stains. He gestured to the window where the rose garden lay, bedraggled, petals strewn like blood drops. Kipsang will hang, perhaps, or transportation, but the greater crime, the theft of a man's life, the Empire's casual cruelties, goes unpunished. The Harrington fortune was built on diamonds, wrenched from African soil with African blood. That ledger does not balance. Japp stirred sugar into his coffee. You're in a philosophical mood. Thought you'd be toasting another triumph. Poirot's smile was wintry. Triumph. I merely arranged the pieces so the picture became visible. The picture was always there. He rose, cane in hand, and crossed to the mantel, where a small object lay beneath a glass dome. Sir Reginald's broken cufflink, the gold pickaxe now dulled. This was the seed. Kipsang kept it all those years in prison, polished it nightly, he told me in the shed. A symbol. When he returned, he wore its twin on his stolen coat. Sir Reginald recognized it in the study, tore it free in his death throes. The past Japp is a patient assassin. Footsteps in the corridor. Clara Thorne appeared, hat and coat in hand, a constable at her elbow. Her face was pale but composed, the spectacles polished, the severe bun restored. Monsieur Poirot, they're taking me to Ashford. I wanted to thank you. You saw the truth beneath my foolishness. Poirot bowed. Mademoiselle, love is never foolish, only blind. You will testify against Kipsang? She nodded. He used Sir Reginald's promises like bait, but I injected the bottle, believing it harmless. My sentence will be light, they say. Afterward, secretarial college, perhaps. A new life. Order from chaos, Poirot said gently. You will flourish. She was led away. Jonathan Harrington followed, dishevelled but sober, a solicitor's briefcase under his arm. Poirot, the estate's mine, such as it is, debts, taxes, the mine shares worthless. But I'll sell the London house, pay the creditors, no more gambling. Father's ghost would approve, I suppose. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Approve? He would demand a balance sheet. But redemption, monsieur, is the sweetest profit. Jonathan managed a crooked smile and departed. Elias Black was next, flanked by two detectives in plain clothes. His cuffs were figurative, city fraud squad, but his wrists might soon know steel. You've ruined me, Poirot. The Rhodesian concession collapses without Harrington capital. I'll be lucky to avoid prison. Poirot regarded him steadily. Ruin, monsieur, is a mirror. You forged your reflection long ago. Black was escorted out. Dr. Lang lingered in the doorway, medical bag in hand, face gaunt. I've resigned from the practice. The medical council will strike me off, but I'll testify about the Johannesburg clinic, opium, forced labour, the cover-ups. Kipsang's trial will open doors better left closed. Perhaps some good comes of it. Poirot inclined his head. Redemption again, docteur. The scalpel cuts both ways. Lang left. The room emptied until only Wilkins remained, polishing a silver tray with mechanical precision. Poirot approached. Monsieur Wilkins, your wife is safe. Kipsang's threats die with his capture. You will keep your position. Wilkins' eyes were moist. Her ladyship, Lady Evelyn, has asked me to stay on as steward. The house passes to a trust for charities. I'll manage it, a quieter life. Poirot patted his shoulder. Order restored. The manor endures. Outside, the Daimler waited, engine purring. Poirot paused on the steps, breathing the cold, clean air. The moor stretched away, heather glowing like amethyst in the morning light. A curlew wheeled overhead, its cry sharp and free. Jap joined him, lighting his pipe. "Train at 11. You'll be in London by tea. Hastings will want the full story, probably write it up for the Strand." Poirot chuckled. "Hastings embellishes. I prefer precision." He surveyed the manor one last time. Its jumbled facades, its ivy, its secrets. This house, Jap, is England in miniature. Layers of history, beauty atop cruelty, order imposed on chaos. We solve one murder, but the edifice remains. Jap puffed smoke. "You're saying the system's rotten?" "I say the little grey cells must remain vigilant. Empires fall when they forget the human equation." The chauffeur opened the Daimler's door. Poirot climbed in, settling against the leather with a sigh. As the car crunched down the gravel, he watched the manor recede in the rear window, smaller, smaller, until it was a child's toy against the vast moor. At Ashford Station, the London train waited, steam curling like incense. Poirot boarded, found his compartment, arranged his valise with care. The guard's whistle blew, the train lurched, gathered speed. Through the window, the moor flashed by, ancient, indifferent, eternal. Poirot opened his notebook, penned a final entry. Case closed. Motive: vengeance for colonial injustice. Method: substitute bottle, ether, locked room illusion. Moral: the past is a poison slower than cyanide, but no less lethal. He closed the book, smoothed his moustache, and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The little grey cells rested until the next puzzle, the next train, the next cry in the night. London bound, the train thundered on, carrying Hercule Poirot toward the city's fog and the certainty of another mystery waiting in the shadows.